Welcome to the show, Chloe. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Tom, and thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, no, pleasure. And I'm interested today to talk about nutrition, of course. But what I've noticed, Chloe, I guess in my last few, maybe probably the last month, we've got a little bit of a change of season happening, sort of, in Melbourne. And I guess just in terms of choices of foods, and maybe also for me personally, reaching for probably the naughty food late at night, which is definitely what making me wake up feeling a bit sluggish in the morning. So like it kind of makes me think about food, nutrition, and how it connects to how we feel in our mood, and kind of fueling your body in the right way. So that's where you come into today, and I'm interested to hear from you. You've obviously well accredited and very successful in what you do. So Chloe, let's talk about nutrition. So when we're talking about food or nutrition in general, one of the common sort of themes or topics that I reckon has become really popular is that idea of gut health. And I say that in inverted commas because it's literally marketed on anything. If you go into like Chemist Warehouse, every vitamin will say gut health on it, and people go, "Oh, I just need to take this, and my guts will be good to go." So when you hear the word gut health as a highly qualified human being, what do you think about, or how do you talk about that?
I feel like that's actually quite a big question, and it probably depends a little bit on the context of it.
Mm,
I think looking at it from my perspective and what we can do to improve gut health, there's so many wonderful things that we can do from a nutrition standpoint to improve our gut health. And what the research is showing is that the healthier your gut, the healthier your overall body is.
mhm.
As you say, though, there's media and supplement companies and you know a lot of food brands as well have really jumped on the bandwagon of that to um, take the promotion of those gut
Mm,
health attributes, which in some cases is very very valid, but in others it's just like this is just another marketing term. So
yes,
as
yeah,
you say, in the hallways of your local supplement store, sometimes there's a few things which are maybe a little bit dubious. But
yeah,
if we come
yeah.
back to the food though, and things that we can practically do to improve our gut health, the biggest tip that I have is actually
Mm,
looking at plant diversity. So there's been some excellent research studies which have spoken about how many different plants per week we need to be eating, and the magic number seems to be 30. Um,
whoa, no way. Oh my God, I feel guilty straight away. 30.
it's I'm actually kind of glad you said that, because I reckon if we sat here and actually counted up what you had been eating across the week, you'd probably be a lot closer to that than you think.
Right.
You might even be exceeding it already. It's not just looking at fruits and veggies, it's also looking at whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices, and things as well. So if you think about, say, for example, maybe for breakfast this morning, starting to get, is it a little bit cooler in Melbourne today? I don't know. Maybe there's you've had some porridge for breakfast, so there's
Yep.
some rolled oats, maybe chuck some blueberries, maybe put some almonds and some chia seeds on there as well.
Yep.
So
Yep.
suddenly that's actually already 4 different plants just from that one meal. And then if you think about what, an average salad or salad sandwich, maybe it's a poke bowl, so those sorts
Yep.
of things that you might be having, on average, those would probably have about 15 different plants in them across the board, just depending on, again,
Yep.
like what you're putting
Yeah.
in them. So
Yep.
there's different things you can do to really make it a lot easier to hit that 30 different plants across the week, but you're also, I think, probably doing better than you probably think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Mm.
fascinating. Yeah, obviously I did not know that. And in terms of gut health, I guess there's obviously a lot of science around what we eat and then how that can affect our mood. I was mentioning earlier, like how, when I do the wrong, sometimes food sort of eating at
Mm.
night, the next day I don't feel as great as I do as if I look after myself and not eat after that certain point in the night. I'm just running around the science around the gut and how it kind of works relative to mood. Is there anything that you can share there?
Yes, certainly. It's an absolutely fascinating area, and it's that from a science and a peer-reviewed paper perspective, it's really exploded in the last few years.
Mm,
Essentially, though, when we eat, what happens is the food will go down our digestive tract, and it will end up being digested and fermented in your intestines. And certain foods will then produce certain things. So, for example, foods which are rich in fiber will tend to end up producing short chain fatty acids, which are really wonderful anti-inflammatory compounds, which have some direct positive impact on our health. So, for example, there's one called butyrate, which has been shown to have a direct impact on bowel cancer risk and reducing the risk of bowel cancer. These can have other health impacts as well, relating to our weight, risk of diabetes, heart disease, improvement in depressive symptoms, improvement in mental health overall. I could go on and on. On the flip side of that, though, if we're eating sort of less healthy foods, so more of those sort of late night snacky things, foods which are really rich in saturated fat, refined sugars, foods that we sort of generally know aren't so great for us. What can actually happen is your microbiome will change, and the byproducts of those are less good for you, and they have less positive health outcomes, such as feeling that bit sluggish when you wake up the next morning. There was a really interesting study done. I can't actually think how long ago it was now, but it was a case study of a guy who would generally eat pretty well. And then for an entire week, he lived on food from a large fast food chain. And he looked at what his microbiome was beforehand, looked at what it was at the end, and then looked at it 3 months later. And in that week where he ate, we'll say, quite poorly, his microbiome changed from having some really wonderful bacteria and organisms there to being more predominantly the less healthy things and the ones that we want less of. And 3 months later, even after he'd returned to his normal healthy diet, it wasn't back to where it was before that week of really poor. It was obviously significantly better and well on the way, but there was still more of those species which we want to be having that bit less of, which still just blows my mind when I think about it, how that single week. And obviously it's not about being perfect, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, enjoy your chippies or your burger or whatever it might be. But if it's all you're having, it's going to have a quite negative impact.
Yeah. It's just that Super Size Me sort of documentary. Is that the one you're talking about there? Or
So
similar?
it was pretty similar. Yeah. So it wasn't that exactly, but it was a similar concept. So
yeah. That's a disgusting idea of eating that type of food for a whole month or something. Not only just consuming like that amount of saturated fats and just how you would feel after that, not to mention your gut, as you mentioned there. It's pretty nuts. Do you there's an association between let's say if you're in a stressed state, so let's say pressures at work, stress at home, little kids driving you bonkers in the morning, that kind of how that kind of increases your fight or flight type response, or that sort of that stress level. You throw in a couple of extra coffees, perhaps. Does that normally lead to bad food choices from what you know or see anecdotally?
Anecdotally, I think it depends on the person, and I think it depends on the habits and what normally happens to them. So when we're in a stressed state, we're more likely to fall back on what we would usually be doing. And I think this is where the importance of being consistent in eating well, exercising regularly, sleeping well as much as you can with little kids. That's where that consistency in those practices becomes absolutely paramount, because then when you are in that fight or flight stage, excuse me, and feeling quite stressed, that's when, even though life is feeling hard, you'll still fall back into, yes, I'm still going to have the healthy lunch rather than stopping at the local drive-through. Yes, I'm still going to actually make sure I eat some breakfast, despite the fact that life has just been pear-shaped this morning and I'm not quite sure how the rest of the day is going to go. So, if you don't have those healthy habits already in place, then you probably not going to go so well. But the more you practice, and for people who are tuning in, if you're like, oh, my healthy habits aren't really there, well, it's not about being like, I've got to be perfect. It's just starting where you are and going, okay, well, I know when I feel stressed at the moment, it's more of a case of takeaway. So let's just start practicing on it, a daily basis. Let's start practicing having a better option, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, very, very wise advice. And I guess that kind of leads to maybe that, like perhaps why people might lead to those comfort foods, if you like, is that comfort eating, if you like. It's that, like, if that's your default, that you might go and eat some chocolate or
Yeah,
something to make yourself to self soothe. Maybe there's a replacement behavior that can make you feel the same way, but isn't isn't going to affect either your gut health or perhaps your weight.
yeah,
Chloe, I'm wondering as well, like this, probably going back, zooming out a little bit here with dietitian. You're a dietitian, as is the rest of your company, and the practitioners that you have that work for different companies and consult lots of employees as well. I'm wondering, like, what would be the top few issues that people want to come in to see you guys for? My assumption is just weight loss would be number one. But what is that right in my assumption?
Um, it depends. It
Mm,
depends a little bit on the client group and on the practitioner. If I look at if I zoomed out and looked at the team
mm,
as a whole, I'd say that probably the top three things that people would come and see our team for, one of them would definitely be weight loss. Next would be gut health issues, and then the next would be
mm,
food intolerances. Um, there, and I think that's just because of the where my expertise is, and then where some of the other staff's expertise is, and as we are growing and getting busier, there's going to be other
mm,
things that fall into that, but that's where it definitely would be at the moment. I want to
mm,
come back to what you mentioned about the chocolate,
mm.
though, before we move on, because there's actually two things that I want to call out there. So,
Yep.
you mentioned the self-soothing, and you're exactly right. Often you know when life is feeling hard, we are going to look for something which helps us to feel better, and something like chocolate, glass of wine, whatever that might like that extra thing might be,
Hmm.
it
Yep.
does often make you feel better in the moment. So having some other behaviors that help you to feel better can be really great. So as an example, maybe it's spending some time with your partner or loved ones. Maybe it's hanging out with your kid, as long as they're not being too crazy. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
as we were talking about before we jumped on. Um, or maybe it's making sure that you've got other things in your day that are helping to support you to feel better. The other thing I wanted to call out, though, is you mentioned that late night snacking, and what actually can happen when we're really tired is the hormone ghrelin ends up being increased, and the hormone leptin ends up being decreased, and there are hunger and fullness hormones. And so when we're tired, we actually think we're more hungry than we are, and reach for usually carb or sugar rich
Mm,
foods. And so it's because we actually think we feel like them, but it's just actually that we're tired, and
mm.
I'm
Go
not
to
sure
bed.
what time. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just time to go, but let's go to bed.
Yeah.
Let's not watch that extra episode of whatever the current show is. Let's just go to
Yeah.
bed. And I know as parents it can be really difficult as well, because it's like, but this is my time,
Yeah.
to,
Yeah. To
have
watch
without
Below Deck.
anything else. And sure.
Yeah. That's true.
So I think sometimes it can be challenging, but just go to bed. You can watch it tomorrow. You can have that time tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, great advice, great call out as well there. I actually feel like that sometimes. I know it's just like, just
Yeah.
go to bed, but for me, it's like I really want to just feel like I've got some time, have some time at night,
Yeah.
where I'm awake and the kids are in bed. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's probably just me.
No, I think it's literally every single parent.
Yeah, no, true. That's good, Chloe. And I guess, yeah, so with the common sort of reasons people come, so weight
Yeah.
loss, intolerance, food intolerances, and gut health. Your expertise is in the food intolerances, as I understand. How
Yeah.
common is that as a general issue? Like, what are some of the common reasons that might trigger, or some of the for people that are listening, where they might go, oh, I really need to consider what's happening there. Are there any scenarios that come up for those people that go, I'm intolerant to X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, certainly. So, food intolerances is, it's a pretty broad
Mm,
spectrum of different things, but I think starting with symptoms is the best place to start. So, if
mm,
you're noticing that you've had changes in your gut symptoms, so maybe you're noticing that you've got more flatulence than usual, you're getting excessively bloated, getting abdominal pain, it's feeling quite uncomfortable, maybe getting diarrhea, constipation,
Mm-hmm.
altered bowel movements from your usual. Maybe you don't actually feel like you're finished when you do go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
That'd be the most common symptoms. And those ones are symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome. And about 20% of Australians, depending on which research you look at, some says about 10, some says 15. I'd say that 20% probably fits if you incorporate sort of a number of different components of it. And following a low FODMAP diet to work out what is triggering symptoms has been shown to be particularly effective for about 75% of people with IBS. One of the things to be mindful of there, though, is if you are experiencing any of the symptoms I just mentioned, just go and see a GP first. Get anything sort of more sinister ruled out. So just to make sure it's not inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, or bowel cancer, because once you start taking things out of your diet, it can start to get a little bit more tricky sometimes to work out exactly what's going on. So go and do that, and then get booked in with a dietitian to help you to figure it out. And the low FODMAP diet's not something to follow forever. It's a diagnostic tool to work out what you're sensitive to, and then it's about modifying your diet so that you're not experiencing the symptoms, but you're also not restricting foods from your diet long term. So, and that's the part that I think a lot of people struggle with, because they go, oh, onion's a problem, I'm never eating onion again.
Yes.
Or, onion's a pretty difficult thing to avoid, particularly if you enjoy eating out and socializing. So working out how you can incorporate it back in. And I've got clients who have previously been specifically really sensitive to onion, and that's a really common one, to now we've got them to a place where they can include it in their diet on a regular basis, because small amounts frequently that are tolerable means that you're actually able to change your microbiome so that you can end up tolerating them. But if you never eat it, you're not going to be able to get to that point.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, the FODMAP is very the FODMAP diet or approach is very interesting, and I think some people now, because of more education, I think people understand at least what that is. Maybe though, for those that don't, what does the FODMAP specifically stand for? Just to sort of tease it out a little further.
Yeah, sure. So FODMAPs is an acronym. So it stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So there's obviously a reason that there's an acronym there. But these are different types of carbohydrates which ferment in your gut, or don't digest very well in your gut, depending on the FODMAP and you as an individual. And as a result, they can cause those symptoms that I mentioned earlier. So that digestive or abdominal discomfort, constipation, diarrhea, wind, bloating, and so on. So they're really common. That's probably the most common one that the team sees. Outside of that, there are other sensitivities as well. So some people it is, dairy or gluten specifically. Most of the time it is more FODMAPy in that case, but sometimes it is. And then there's another group as well called food chemical sensitivity, where it's similar to FODMAPs in that there's components in certain foods that people don't tolerate very well. But the symptoms of food chemical sensitivity are much more far-reaching. You can still get those IBS type symptoms, but you might also be experiencing skin rashes, mouth ulcers, migraines, asthma. Sort of looking at a number of different symptoms or systems around the body where you can end up experiencing symptoms. And again, it's a similar process in that you do an elimination, but then we do need to look at reintroducing things again, because again, it is that quite restrictive diet, and you don't need to be strict long-term with either of those.
Thanks for explaining that. That makes a lot of sense, and I guess for those that are listening that might be having some of those issues, it's really helpful for them to understand it in full. Within that, I guess, Chloe, and I guess talking more around nutrition and workplaces specifically, things have changed a lot, as we all know, in the workplace. Last few years have been a bit random, working at home more than the office. And we're obviously both at home today. And naturally for me, I tend to eat better when I'm at home. I can be a bit more, I can get in the kitchen and maybe do something that's more practical, cook some eggs, perhaps at lunch, that kind of thing. But when we go into the office, and I'm there about 3 times a week, things change and I need to be more organized. It's a little bit of a shift in behaviors and habits again. With from your, I guess, your perspective, and considering the types of clients that you would see or corporates that you would speak to, I'm just wondering if you have any sort of tips around how to prepare, like how people can prepare themselves so that they stay organized with their nutrition, and maybe planning ahead so that they're not spending all their money on terrible lunches or high carb sort of lunches when they're at work, which I've been guilty of before as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I think it depends on what the individual is requiring, but across the board, I think it's always going to come back to what's going to help make the healthy choice the easy choice. Because if it's an easy choice and an easy thing to do, it's more likely to happen. And that's not just with your nutrition, that's with any healthy habit. So from a nutrition perspective, I think if you know which days you're going to be in the office, know which days you're going to be at home. I'm a really big fan of planning ahead and prepping ahead. Now, that doesn't mean you've got your perfectly organized little lunch boxes like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah.
I mean, if that works for you, then for sure. But maybe it's instead looking at more some ingredient prep. So maybe you've cooked ahead. You mentioned that you've got the eggs, but maybe ahead of time you've cooked up some rice, or you've roasted some veggies. And so then you can end up making like a roast vegetable salad with some poached eggs, some baby spinach, and it's a beautiful salad, but it's actually not taking you very long to do because you've done the prepping ahead of time. Or maybe it's a day that you're heading into the office, so you're going to do something quite similar, but instead of the poached eggs, you do some boiled eggs. Maybe cook those, say, in the office is Monday, Tuesday, so maybe you cook those on Sunday night, and then that way it's done and you've got that organized, and so you've got that prepped. And by having, I suppose, having that thought process of thinking ahead and knowing what you're going to have, it means that when you're in that moment of being like, oh, I'm hungry, what's for lunch? It's not what's for lunch. It's like, oh, I know what I'm having for lunch and this is going to be delicious. And so you're not trying to make that decision in the moment when you're maybe a bit stressed, a bit tired, a bit hungry. And it's like, oh, I could just go and grab that, heavy pasta dish, say, which is maybe not the best choice for most people at lunchtime. And, there's obviously ways you can make it a better choice, but instead it's helping you to sort of think ahead and know what you're going to have. And that's not just the lunch. I think people get very focused on lunch, which is obviously important. The other part is snacks. If you think about, time in between meals and energy dips, you often hear about that sort of 3 p.m. crash. And if you've eaten more earlier in the day, it's going to be easier to manage that 3 p.m. Still having a snack, but it's going to be easier to choose, some yogurt, piece of fruit, handful of nuts, as opposed to being like, it's time for the chocolate bar because I'm going to need that little spike in energy. So I think by planning ahead, it means that you know what you're having, when you're having it, whether you've planned it to the nth degree and it's already packaged up prettily, or if it's just been organized, both ways can work really, really well.
Yeah, unreal. I made the Cardinals sing yesterday, Chloe, and I'm sort of giving you all my, it's like a confessions by me. I had a coffee yesterday at 1 o'clock, which I never do yesterday. Again, just a bit tired.
Yeah.
Worst sleep ever last night. And when I was at this coffee line yesterday, there was so many people getting coffees in the afternoon all the way till about 2 o'clock. This is in corporate environment. It's obviously I've kind of gone off track here from food, but this is still food in some ways. You get caffeine as a thing. Do you find that caffeine, like when you're with your clients, the corporate clients specifically, is caffeine one of the is it a big issue in general for people? Too much or wrong timing?
It is a big issue for those exact two things you've said. It's too much, wrong timing. So with caffeine, more isn't better. It's about finding your sweet spot, and that sweet spot's going to be different for everybody because how you react to caffeine is actually genetic, as well as part of it is how frequently you have it, but it is a genetic thing. So, some people will have a espresso at 10 o'clock and then they'll go straight to bed and not have any issues. Whereas I'm same as you. If I have one after 1 o'clock, then it's setting myself up for not a great sleep. And a lot of people are like that as well. And corporate world, really, I think it's, I hear all the time people being, having, last coffee of the day at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how is this not having a bad impact on your sleep? But it's a really vicious cycle, right? Because then you sleep poorly, then you need it the next day because you're really tired again, and
Correct.
so on. So I think I like to suggest keeping your coffees to earlier in the day, and aiming to stop and I'm going to say somewhere between midday and 2, depending on you, because for some people they can have one at 2 o'clock and they literally have no problems. Others will, if they have one after midday, then they're still going to be up all night. So it does depend on the individual. The research around benefits of coffee are at about 3 coffees per day, and that's 3 shots. So not 3 double shots.
Double shots. Yeah.
So I'm never, no, I shouldn't say never. It's going to be a rare occurrence where I'm like, stop having coffee, stop having caffeine. I actually think caffeine's like one of the most useful substances that we can have to help us to focus better and to perform better. And that's both cognitively and from a sports perspective. But it is one that I think does get abused is probably not quite the right word, but it is such a crutch for so many people. And if we look at, well, what can we do to improve what else is going on for you, in that having it a bit earlier, making sure you're eating better earlier on in the day as well, because that will help you to have more energy for the afternoon. And then also making sure that you go to bed so that you get plenty of sleep. And I know I said before, parents, I remember when my oldest was, she was maybe like sort of 6 months old or something, and just hearing like, you have to get good sleep, I was just like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm doing the best I can. So I totally appreciate as parents, it can be really hard to get good sleep, get adequate sleep. But it's about working with what you've got as well. And so, maybe it is going to bed that little bit earlier than you'd want to, so that you're getting at least a decent block in before they might wake up, or, try to climb out of the cot, come and jump out of bed with you, whatever it might be that's happening. So, setting yourself up for success where you can, and then, making use of, on the weekends, maybe you do have a little nap, if you can. In the middle of the day, if they're still small enough to be having sleeps themselves. Fingers crossed.
That's it. No, that's really good.
Yeah, sorry, if that was all I was going to say there.
Yeah, I think when we start, like, naturally, I'm as you know, I'm a physiotherapist, so I'm talking physical health quite a lot, and movement, and get yourself moving. And what I see with my clients is, they can do the gym, they can commit to a that consistent gym workout or running or something like that. And always where the letdown is, in my opinion anyway, is probably the sleep section, and also the food section. And sleep is like, oh, I can manage with whatever. And then the food side of things is just never really considered, because it's always I work out 4 times a week, that kind of thing. Do you see that as well within your clients' base? Is like people kind of happy to exercise, compromise on sleep, and then nutrition's not, like, they're obviously coming to you because they want help with that, but is it sort of the last straw, do you think, for them?
Yeah, it's I think it's really interesting, because it feels like everything else can be sacrificed. So, nothing else can be sacrificed. It has to be the sleep or the food. And then exercise might come after that, as like if something else has to go. But it, like, priority wise, it's like, I'll just have to sleep less so I can get that presentation done. Or, I've had a meeting put in my diary at lunchtime, so now I'm not going to be able to have my lunch. And I see that sort of thing happening all the time. Probably the biggest problems that I see people having in their nutrition when they come to see me, particularly if they're already exercising regularly, is one is eating at the right times around their physical activity through the day to then support energy for the rest of the day. And the second component of that is like eating the right things. So, we touched on carbohydrates before. We obviously don't want to go too nuts on carbs through the day, but we also need to make sure we're having enough to support recovery if we've exercised in the morning, but also to make sure that we've got enough to support our energy and our brain through the day. Carbs are our brain's favorite source of fuel. So not having carbs is actually not going to be super helpful. It's just about having the right ones at the right times. So if I just think about a common person, and this would be a male or a female, it would be, you get up in the morning, go and, head out for that 10K run or go to that high intensity gym class. And, great that they've gotten up and done that. But then often breakfast will be delayed because they've got to get ready for work, and then they might eat breakfast when they get into work, or they might be fasting because it's healthy and not eating anything until lunchtime, and then wondering why they're absolutely ravenous by 3 o'clock, eating a block of chocolate, having an extra coffee, feeling like crap, and then doing it all again the next day. But by making a couple little changes to that, it can absolutely change how they're feeling and how they're performing through the day. So if you're a female, in both of those exercise situations I gave, so that HIIT class, that high intensity class, or if you are heading out for like for your run or your bike ride or whatever it might be. Males, to some degree, this is true, but males, I don't really care so much if it's fasted, depending on what the session is. Females, I'm going to say eat something beforehand, and this is a hormonal thing. So have something to eat before, and then when you get home, have your breakfast when you get home. So have your shower, get dressed, but make sure you've got time to actually eat breakfast. And it doesn't have to be sitting down to a big gourmet meal. It could be as simple as making yourself a smoothie, which you can literally put together in a couple of minutes, and then maybe you sit on the train on the way into work, or if you're working from home that day, you can sip on it at your desk. And that means that you're getting that nutrition in, you're getting it in quickly, some protein powder, some milk, some oats, some banana, some berries, whatever other bits and pieces you want to add into that to make it right for you. Then you're getting your protein, you're getting your carbs, you're getting some other bits and pieces in there that you need as well. And that's then setting you up to not be ravenous at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You're going to be able to focus better all morning. You're probably going to have less coffee. Like, the list goes on. And it's not a big change to make. It's such a small thing to do, but it's actually life-changing for a lot of people. And I know it sounds so silly to be being like, having breakfast after a workout is life-changing, but it literally can be if you've been skipping it and, life's been how it was looking before. So
and the whole fasting kind of idea and whatever, some people have really ran with that to the point of fasting every day, which is what, if it works, or if you can actually make it work. But I guess what you're saying is, especially in the women, fueling yourself before a workout, from recovery wise, that's going to help you as well. Chloe, I wonder I've noticed as well, sorry, I'm going, continuing on the theme of, we've spoken about carbohydrates, protein. I want to talk about protein quickly as well. I've noticed, like, with everything that's on the shelf, especially in the dairy section, we've got protein in this, protein. Again, it's probably on the whole marketing thing of gut health, but it does contain more protein. Do you feel like a lot of people don't know how to get protein, and that's why it's marketed everywhere? Or, I noticed as well with some of the fitness challenges around the food plans and things, it's high protein, very, still carbohydrates in amongst it, but protein's been spoken about a lot more. Is that a trend or is that a need?
A little bit of both. So it's definitely, I think, a trend from a food industry perspective to be marketing the protein content more. What we know, though, if we come back to the nutrition side of things, eating protein at regular intervals across the day will help you to feel more satisfied through the day, so you'll get less hungry. It will also help you to have your muscle building switched on through the day as well. So by eating protein regularly, that helps to keep that process switched on. So if you're somebody who is active, it means you're going to get more benefit from having that. So I like to imagine you've got sort of silos of protein that you're having at your main meals and at your snacks across the day. So it is that sort of regular intake at similar sort of levels at each meal through the day, rather than, sort of a traditional Australian breakfast is actually pretty low protein, and then dinner's, got 50, 60 grams. So exactly. Whereas if we can sort of adjust that around a little bit, that's actually going to have much better health outcomes. But the food industry has definitely jumped on that. I think that there's actually a lot of positives in that it helps to identify where you might be getting the protein in and making sure you're getting enough at your different meals. But I also think it's over focused on there. And now people are just like protein, protein, protein. It's
Yeah.
Like it's important, but it's not just about the protein. And
Yeah.
you know, to use the example that I gave just before, like I had a client recently who they were nearly getting it right in that they were getting back from their training session. They were having their breakfast, but their breakfast was literally like a protein shake. So like they were having something, a protein shake, and then I think it was like 3 or 4 eggs. So I'm like,
Yeah.
great, like
Protein.
you're having breakfast, but there's like protein. Like, like have some toast, put a banana in it, like, you know, do something just to get some carbohydrate in there as well. So you're getting that bit of balance. And again, when they made that change to incorporate carbohydrate into the breakfast as well, so it wasn't just protein, they felt so much better for the rest of the day. Again, focus, hunger levels. It's, you know, it's about the package, not just about single nutrients.
Yeah. And I guess overall that's leading to better performance in inverted commas, meaning, you know, your ability to run, if that's your thing, or focus at work, or be a better parent, and not lose the plot at the kids like I probably did this morning.
or all three. All three. So,
Chloe, thanks so much for your time today. It was really insightful. Lots of great little gold nuggets there in terms of how to, you know, keep yourself in check with your nutrition. And I think for our listeners, if they can, I'd highly recommend following Chloe on Instagram. There's lots of great tips and recipes and other bits of information that can just keep you across some of the latest. That's what's happening in the nutrition world. Chloe, thanks again.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom.
Just turning us off.